So now that I've done my job talking about the newest unit to come out on the NA version of the game, I can talk about the real unit I want to focus on, that being the writer support herself, Lady Rains. And you might have guessed by the title of this video that I was gonna slam Rains, drag her through the mud and all that stuff, but no, it's actually quite the opposite. I love this unit. I love the type of support that Rains is, where she does do the meta thing, quote unquote, by giving you 50% battery with all of her skills, but she has so much utility in all of her skills. And usually, just for the sake of keeping things simple, I refer to her as a second waiver, because obviously even if you have two waivers, you can only bring one of them in your party unless you count your support, but you get what I'm saying. It's essentially another 50% generic support that just gives you a lot of really good stuff. And as I'm showing in this video, sure, you could try to use her as a farmer if you don't have the meta supports and you have a really strong, I guess, Buster AoE or a really good looper. Maybe you have a K-scope plus a pen skill. Sure, you could do all that, but I don't really think that's where she shines. I mean, she can kind of be your budget farmer support, but who's really going to be using her for that? Where I think she really shines is going into CQ content, the weird advanced quests that we're going to be getting in the future. Actually, we're going to be getting one at the end of the month. And then also some of these strange bleached earth quests that we start getting with Ordeal Call. I think this is where she really shines. It's just unfortunate because for most players, instead of going for, say, like a Rains Castoria setup, it's probably just going to be double Castoria, double Koyenskaya, double Scotty, because let's be honest, it's way easier to do that and you get a lot better results. But sometimes you want to have a little bit of fun. Sometimes you want to bring a different support. And as you'll see at the very end of this video, I do just that. It's a really big nail biter fight. But Rains does come really clutch, even though I kind of panic at the end. I shouldn't have panicked. I should have known that Rains had everything under control. But with that being said, if you enjoy these type of videos, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that daily FGO content. Well, let's start getting right into this, starting off with her hits. Now, for the most part, your supports, nobody really focuses on the hits because mainly you're going to be using them for, you know, their skills and everything. Maybe their NP every now and then if it's really good, like, say, waivers, say, like your Castoria, your Merlins, your Lady Avalons, and Rains, who I feel does get to be in that discussion, especially after they did buff her NP. And so, since you do want to go for that NP, it's nice that she has some very nice arts cards with 4 hits a pop, backed by 0.64% NP gain, and a passive 8% buff to not only her arts cards, but also her quick cards, which don't have the quite as good 4 hit, but they're rocking 3 hits, meaning you can get some decent enough star gen out of them, and some decent NP gain if you happen to crit on them. Do keep in mind, this is one of the issues with Rains, is her classing as a writer. She has very, very high natural star weight, but this was more of an issue that was kind of being phased out when she was coming out anyway, because a lot of your main DPSs are going to have a very strong star weight skill. So sometimes it may come up if you have like 17 stars, 20 stars in rotation, but most of the time you're going to have a setup where you can provide enough stars, or your main DPS is just going to have like a 5,000% star weight skill, like a Jalter or something, and they're just going to steal all the stars anyway. So that really shouldn't be all that big of a deal. But let's start talking about some of her skills, because the skills are what pay the bills. So starting off with her first skill, this is essentially just a slightly weaker version than Waver's defensive skill. They both are giving you that 10% battery, but instead of giving 30% defense, she only gives 25%, and instead of 500 damage cut, she gives you 400, which realistically isn't going to make all that big of a difference unless you need to hit a specific defensive value. Like, say you're trying to hit exactly 100% defense to take no damage, then maybe that will come up, but all that damage cut should also kind of offset that a little bit, so you're really not going to notice a difference. I mean, you'll see that your guys are just as tanky, and it really shouldn't come up in any meaningful way, but just kind of keep that in the back of your head if you're trying to hit a specific defensive value. You're trying to do some really big juggernaut build, you know, you're bringing your Bedivirs, your Waivers, your Mashes, you know, all that kind of stuff, trying to just stack the entire party's defense. She's a little bit off, but it's probably going to be fine. Just very good for making the entire party very, very tanky. Her second skill is where things start to get a bit interesting, because this is a targetable 20% battery that gives them a 40% attack buff for 3 turns. Yeah, we're talking like monstrous strength levels of attack buffs that you're getting for free for 3 turns. Well, not entirely for free. See, it will lower Rain's own attack by 20% for 3 turns, which I guess they're trying to offset the DPS Rain's meta, so If you're going to be using your Reigns and giving her her own buff, know that it's probably just going to be essentially 20%, but who on earth is going to be doing that? Who cares if the support is getting 20% less attack? I want that big, fat, juicy attack buff on all my DPSs, and it's just great. It's just very nice. I mean, more damage, you're taking down bosses faster. If you have to use her as your farming support or a Shen Gong bullet, that 40% attack buff is going to be very strong, and 20% battery, I mean, that's 20% battery. That's always going to be good. Closing out her skills is going to be her third skill, which actually got buffed a while ago, and this was already pretty good on launch, but then they were just like, you know what, it needs another 20% battery so she can give you 50% in total. We can't have her losing completely out to Waver, and I kind of see this as the alternate version of Waver's crit skill. See, they both give you 50% total, they both have a solid defensive skill for the party, they both have a solid offensive buff for the party, but instead of giving crit, she gives you 2 hits of invincibility and 30% debuff resistance for 3 turns. Which, the 30% debuff resistance, I feel like that's kind of a bit there from like a bygone era of FGO where we used to just kind of get little debuff resistance buffs, you know, sometimes around like 50%, but nowadays we get like 100%, we get buff removal resistance, we have debuff immunities, we start to get that stuff, so this isn't quite as strong, but if you do pair it with, say, a servant that has magic resistance plus goddess core, they've already got like that 40 to 50% innate debuff resistance. This bringing them up to 80% is not that bad. It means they'll whiff most debuffs, but still not quite as good as having, you know, just flat out debuff immunity. But the 20% battery and the 2 hits of invincibility, I think definitely make up for that. It allows you to not have to waste, say, your mystic codes. It allows you to not have to waste your own survivability buffs because you can just kind of rely on range to keep your guys safe. And overall, it's a very, very good package that also complements Waver's own package very, very well if you want to use them together, because you get a lot of defensive value in range and you get a lot of offensive value in Waver. You get the crits in the attack, where you are still getting the attack from range, but not, you know, really any crit damage or anything like that. And their NPs also complement each other rather well, where they both, as we'll kind of just get into the NP right now, have this defense down ability where it starts off at 30%, which is really good already, but where Waver is going to be like stunning and reducing the enemy's charge, what she is doing is very, very unique because she's going to grant the entire party ignored defensive class disadvantage for 3 turns. So what that means is if you bring an archer to fight a lancer, that lancer is going to hit you for neutral damage, which might not sound like all that, you know, crazy of a deal because you're still an archer. You're not hitting them for any advantage. Where I really start to like this is when you're using stuff like foreigners or berserkers, because it turns your berserkers into neutral instead of them just getting Tim Tam slammed by everything in the game. Same thing for foreigners. They're super effective against each other. You can bring Reigns, and Reigns can make your foreigner have a bit more of an advantage by not only being tankier, but by removing their susceptibility to being hit by the other foreigner's attack, which I think is very strong. And then they buffed it because it already removed her own debuffs, which I wish that was upgraded to a party-wide debuff. That would have made this a little bit better, but they did at least give it the 30 to 50% NP gain for 3 turns for the entire party, and overcharging the party's NP by 1 stage for 3 turns, which I don't even use when we do the Kiara clear with Vlad Extra over there, which I kind of wish I did. There are a few points where the extra NP gain or overcharging the power mod would have probably done a little bit more damage to make this fight a bit more smooth, but I did just want to show that Reigns could still get the job done before she got her buff. She was already very, very strong as is, and now with her buff, she's going to be even better. So with that being said, why do I say that she's really good but not needed? Well, the unfortunate reality is what I brought up at the very beginning of the video, is that she's just not nearly up to par with a lot of the other supports. Koyanskaya and Castoria pretty much revolutionized the game around their card types, and Scotty did the same thing during year 3 for Quick. It's just she's kind of been left in the dust a little bit by the other two, as they're a little too insane and they just refuse to buff Scotty at all for some reason. Look, the NP buff does not count for her in her case, alright? But she's still a lot better than what Range is able to do because she still is very, very strong. Scotty giving you that 50% battery, lowering the defense, the massive quick buff, and the huge quick crit damage allows you to not only quick farm, but it also allows you to just burst down enemies in 3 turns as long as you can kind of get the ideal scenario going. But it does allow you to just kind of rip enemies apart with either a huge quick NP or massive quick crits, and Range just kind of can't hold up to that level of power. It's why you'll see people like Waver and Reigns kind of fall down into A tier, because they're not bad. It's just we're getting way better supports that are just doing way too much that these other guys just cannot keep up. And so I think she is a very fun servant to use. I think she's very good for CQs. I recommend summoning for her. She's just very nice to have in your Chaldea, especially if you enjoy Chen Gong farming. Having extra bullets is always going to be good, but even in that avenue, it's probably worth using other supports that give you more offensive value as your Chen Gong bullets. You know, Waver giving you the attack buff is almost equivalent to using the Reigns, but then you could bring in like a Castoria. You could bring in, you know, a Scotty for the defense down. You could start bringing in an Oberon if you start getting real crazy. You know, you could bring in a Koyan Sky to potentially get a power mod on your Chen Gong as well. But there's also something to be said that, you know, Koyan Sky might not be all that useful for Chen Gong because, you know, the power mod, maybe you're not fighting man or humanoid, and maybe that 40% attack buff from range just goes crazy, in which case maybe range is going to be a little bit better. Like, I'm a huge range stan. I think she's very, very good. I really like this unit. I think she got massively overlooked when she initially came out, and I can understand why, because we don't have that much CQ content right now over on NA, but as we start to get more advanced quests, as we start to move into especially Lost Belt 7, where the fights are going to get really, really annoying, and then we start moving into Ordeal Call and start getting the Bleached Earth missions, you're going to want to have that diversity in your box. And I'm not saying you can't blow them up with double Castoria or double Koyan Skya, plugs hitting an Oberon. That's still probably going to be fine. But it will be nice to have a nice tanky support that you can bring in that could also just kind of negate any class disadvantage that you have going on. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I already said that I rank her as about an A rank servant. I think she's very, very strong. Probably going to give her that A+ just out of a little bit of a personal bias because she just is really solid. I just think she's missing out on something that they won't give her. They're not going to give her that X factor, that Castoria, that Scotty, that Koyan Skya have. It's just not meant to be with Reigns, unfortunately. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.